All right, thank you to our panel for being here today. We're going to be talking about risk, like I said. So the first question goes to Chief Mitchell, and it is, if we focus on risk and risk assessment, does that mean that we will not be aggressive?
Thanks, Joe. So the short answer to answer that question is no. If we talk about risk and risk assessment, it does not mean that we're not going to be aggressive. Risk and risk assessment are part of our decision process that we've adopted through our command philosophy that's on the cards. Thanks, Chief Vestal, for missing my pocket here. But the level of aggressiveness we apply to our incidents is completely separate from this process. This process is designed to have us come to a outcome in an incident that's a positive one, and so our level of aggressiveness is dictated by that process. So they're two separate things, I guess, is what I'm saying in short. We as a professional organization need to look at risk. We look at it from the top, from my level, from the fire chief's level, from the board level of the legal aspects, all the way down to when somebody's on the fire ground on the end of a hose line and what their level of risk is. Do I open the nozzle or not? And how do I manage the risk in front of me to mitigate it the best I can? So to me, no, they're not the same thing. They're totally different.
Although separate, which I agree with you, I think one informs the other. And I think when done well, and we'll talk about this down the road when we start defining risk, and we start talking about how we assess it and what we do to mitigate it, and then our tolerances even, maybe even the next question. But when we define and mitigate risks well, and according to the priorities of the incident, we allow ourselves to be as aggressive as we possibly can for that successful outcome. It actually frees us to be more aggressive because we're operating within the boundaries of a risk assessment and a risk mitigation plan that allows us to go and do it. And so it's not that we're focusing on the risk part of it. We're focusing on the risk in order to inform the action. And once we inform that action, we can then go be as aggressive as that incident allows us to be within the confines of our risk mitigation and our risk tolerance according to the priorities of that incident. That's the way I look at it. It actually allows us to be as aggressive as we possibly can within those parameters.
And it's not just to say we're going to go to an incident and be aggressive, Mike. I think that's important. It's we're going to go to an incident, take a look at it, make a decision that's in alignment with the incident priority, and then be as aggressive as we decide that we need to be because it's all of the information we're taking in. So that's a good thing to remember, that they do help each other, but they are different.
So Chief Lozano, could you define risk for us and then what you meant by risk tolerance?
I think the way I define risk, and I'm open to you if you guys have a different definition of it, but really risk comes down to any situation that lends itself to the possibility of a negative outcome. And so when I look at incidents that we go to or anything from station interactions to legal to incidents, any situation that has the potential to have a negative outcome for me I define that as a risk. And when I talk about risk tolerances, so risk tolerances, after I define a risk, then I look at ways to mitigate that risk. And once I've done all the mitigations that I can possibly do for that particular situation, I then define my risk tolerance for that. Can I tolerate a high level of risk for our crews, for our members, for that interaction, for that legal situation, whatever it is, or do I need to have a very low tolerance for that risk? In other words, I don't engage, I don't have that conversation, or I don't talk to the lawyer. I don't know. But once you define that risk tolerance for whatever that situation is, then, and when we talked about being aggressive, then you can be aggressive appropriately within that risk tolerance for that particular situation. If you talk about it at my level, I'm listening to captains do assessments on incidents and battalion chiefs make assignments, and listening to primaries clear, all the stuff, doing a search, engaging in all the things that we engage in on these incidents. And I get to sit back a little bit and listen to that and decide whether or not our risk tolerance as an agency is in line with that particular incident priorities. And when we talk about life priority, we're going to go out there and we're going to risk a lot for those life priorities. When we talk about the primaries clear, the lady's got her dog, they're the only two living things in that house. Guess what? Our risk tolerance at that point should be a lot less. Is it possible that neighbor ran in looking for the dog or something like that? Yes. Why we have a job, because the impossible is possible. Is it probable? No, it's not. And so unless you come back to the command philosophy, unless you have some additional situational awareness that brings that probability up higher so that your tolerance for that risk gets more, then we should not engage, or we should engage easily into those situations.
I think that's a great point to make about over the life of an incident, if you will, about the changes in our risk and what we're willing to accept has to be part of what we're looking for, which is intelligent decisions made through a process, right? And intelligence is maybe not the right word or the best word, but we want people that are critical thinking problem solvers that are free to make decisions based off the information that you're given on an incident. And every one of them is different. And then throughout an incident, it changes. And that's important to recognize as well. And you hit the nail on the head with that. You know, and it's interesting if you think about it in this way, which I've spent some time doing, is if I were to say, you know, we have a fully involved house fire that we're arriving to, what's our risk assessment, right? There's, 9 of us here, plus the folks making the video. I guarantee you, every one of us saw a different house fire. Did you see a single story, second, 2-story? Did you see a mobile home? Did you see so it's not just one dimensional, I guess. It can be subjective to some level. It's whatever you're seeing from your windshield on whatever incident based off of the current situation of what you're gathering, and then how do you reevaluate that part of it as you come back throughout the incident when we hit those benchmarks or somebody coming up and telling us something. That absolutely can flex our risk assessment and our risk tolerance and could potentially change our incident priority throughout an entire incident. So it's always moving, and that's one of the fun things and why we got into this job, right? It's always changing depending on what we get. And sometimes we don't have all the information. We have to make decisions, and that's why it's important to have these discussions before the incident and train on this stuff so that when we get to the incident, it's just second nature. We know what we're doing. So.
Perfect.
I'd like I'll bring it down a level down to the captain fireman level. Perfect. And I disagree with you a little bit on the probability of someone being inside the structure when the lady's outside with her dog and saying everyone's out. If you look at the data that's come out through the firefighter rescue survey, it paints a lot different picture about how many victims are found post someone on the front porch saying everyone's out. There's a lot of different possibilities of why someone would still be inside the house. You could have murder crimes. You could have, a sleepover that they forgot about. Grandma dropped the kids off they didn't know about. It's a lot more common than I think you think it is if you take a look at the data.
Can I talk about that for a quick second?
Sure.
Let's have a talk about that, because I think
I
absolutely agree with you.
Well, I think the command philosophy shows that we're going to consider every residential structure occupied until we prove it otherwise. Am I wrong in that?
No, for sure. We don't move past that until it's a primary clear, right?
Right.
So here's what I'm really talking about, because 99% of the time, and this is for everybody, 99% of the time you get an incident, it escalates to a certain point, and then it stabilizes and de-escalates, correct? Mm-hmm. And in that escalation, we're probably going to search 99.9% of the time, because we're assuming that there's somebody in there. We haven't cleared it yet. Even if grandma and her dog are saying nobody else is in there, we're going in there. Here's where the decision becomes. Right when it doesn't stabilize or de-escalate and continues to rise in escalation and therefore in risk and complication, at some point there's a decision in there that says, like, we can no longer tolerate an all-in behavior, all-in aggressive attitude, because our additional situational awareness does not increase our risk tolerance for that. So the house is moved from incipient to fully involved. We still have grandma out there with the dog saying nobody else is in there. At some point, we got to say our risk tolerance, it ends now, whether that's right away or a few minutes later, whatever that is. And I'm not talking about every incident where you go up, stabilize, come down. We're probably going to search 99.9% of the time. But at that critical moment, when the incident is still escalating and we have no additional information that says there's more people in there, there is a point where our risk tolerance is enough. That's enough of a risk.
Yeah. And if I could add to your point on I think you commented on the recent survey they went out with rescues that people have been involved in. And yeah, if you were to look at that statistically based on those numbers that were reported, it would be higher. but it would be, in my opinion, unfair to not consider how many times we did high-risk operations for searches that didn't produce victims. Like, how many times do you do that, like when that you're still in that first escalating period of the incident and people went in there and aggressively did their thing, but there were no victims in truth, right? Like, so I think you got to look at all those numbers to really come up with like some legitimate percentages to say this is worth it based on data. You know what I'm saying?
And I think another part to look at with that too is when we determine that risk tolerance is no longer acceptable, it simply might mean a change in tactics also. It doesn't mean we're changing the whole strategy of what we're trying to do. We just may have to reevaluate our tactics and make an adjustment there so that we're back in alignment with our incident priorities and our level of risk.
To mitigate a little bit of that risk, right?
Nobody's walking away.
So, like Chief Lozano said, we end up searching things 99.9% of the time. You know, whether it's in the first 2 minutes or the first hour or the next day, if it was something like super bad, we're going to eventually search just about everything we go on, right? So, but those other things that we do to support that search may be, you know, those mitigating factors that we can somehow eliminate the risk to our own personnel going in there to do it. Like adding 2 out, or, you know, adding additional hose lines, getting that 360 and doing all that stuff before we introduce people into that environment.
We just shouldn't forget that, like, you would want that house searched as if it were your children inside that house and not any other way.
Yep. You mentioned, Count, you mentioned something about proving that it's not occupied. What is that defined as when you say that?
Primary search is all cleared.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Primary search is all cleared.
Okay. So fair enough to say that even on primary searches, we've missed victims as a fire service in general, and I think more local than that. So I think that is a subjective term also as far as proving. We will do our damnedest to go in and search a searchable structure when we have information, or like you said, assumption is a dangerous thing, but sometimes we need to make assumptions. Like, we come up on something and there's a chance of it being occupied, we need to look for reasons that we won't go in, and that's part of that bigger picture. What's my awareness? Is this a boarded up structure and, you know, slated for demolition, half of it's gone because of whatever? I mean, is it under construction? Those kinds of things. So we will do our damnedest to search buildings on fire, and that's just not one thing that we do. Risk goes for everything in addition to what we do as far as structure fires. But we're looking at it from a higher level to say, what are all the other factors inclusive of that, to say, here's what we are going to search and what we're not going to search right now, without, like Chief Daly said, putting some other mitigations in place to make it more, make the tolerance of our risk a little bit more in line if we have some of those extenuating factors. And that's the other thing. Using these examples are finite. There's an infinite number of things that, as a captain on an engine company, or a firefighter on a engine company, or a truck, or a battalion chief, there's things that you're seeing all the time that we just can't say, here's how it goes every time. What we're doing here is saying, make an intelligent, a smart decision, because you've looked at all those factors and said, you know what, beyond what my scope is or what my experience is, that structure right there that's on fire right now, whatever you pictured when I said a house fire, is searchable because of X, Y, and Z, or here's why we need to hold off on search, because we need to put these mitigations in place to search it. So it moves all over. And again, that's why this job is exciting. There's all kinds of opportunities to have those influences, right? So anyway, good conversation though, because it's one of those things that can get confusing out there. Always and never, those in our jobs, oh man, we want to be smarter than that is what we're looking for. And I think we can, and we are. Here's the other piece. I don't want to lose out on this. We've come a long way as an organization as we look way back in our history of where we've been and where we're at now as far as tactics and strategy. Generally speaking, there are things we can do better, but I'll tell you what, as an agency, I am really proud of where we're at when you talk about how our incidents go these days. And we're having these discussions because of our growth as an agency. This is exciting stuff, exciting time for us to be in. So. Sorry.
I'd like to add that I think I had a realization being in the command post, and rank doesn't matter. As company officers, as battalion chiefs, you're sitting in the command post looking at a building, and I had an experience actually with Chief Lozano where we had a commercial fire and it was escalating, and it was continuing to escalate. We weren't worried as much about life from the public being in there, but our own people being in there. And so managing that risk took recognizing the conditions of it and saying, all right, here's our trigger point. Here's how we have an acceptable amount of risk right now, but we're putting a time limit on it, and we're looking for these key factors and elements to change. We may need to change our strategy. Fortunately, fire was found, it was knocked out, all the smoke conditions improved, and we didn't have to pull the trigger. But it was about managing the risk and recognizing what are we risking and what's it for, and what's our tolerance for that. And so that was one that was enlightening to me, to see the perspective shift from being on that same fire, maybe as a company officer or a firefighter, or it doesn't matter the rank, it's just what your task is, influences how you tolerate risk and what your perspective is of it.
I'll throw something else out there as well, a new mindset that's being talked about in firehouses with the brownouts. With our staffing, as you said, we've come a long way, which we really have, with our SOGs and how we operate. And we've moved forward a lot in the last 20 years. We're at a point now where we're almost moving backwards a step, because these conversations that I'm having with other truck company officers are, okay, now we don't have a pumper with us. So we have that delayed resource. And there has been instances, I've been on them, where you're the first arriving unit on a truck and you don't have any water. Are you going to be able to do an effective search? Depending on the conditions, and we see it all. If it's a bedroom fire, can we isolate that? Can we get in there, do a quick search? Or can we just not make entry at all? We've had that as well. What do we do there? How are we going to operate? What task are we going to take next? And it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And with risk assessment, it brings on a whole new mindset of how we're going to operate safely, but also aggressively. How far are we going to take our aggressiveness to save a life, without having that resource that we're so used to having. Some battalions, as we know, get a lot of engine companies there quick, not so much in the other spots. So it's a mindset that we need to have. Talking about doing more with less, there's no better example, I don't think.
Yeah, and you hit it. The day-to-day stuff impacts our ability to make those decisions based off what our incident is dealing us, right? If you're up on the north end and Antelope way up by the border, it's a different animal if you don't have an engine with you. Brownouts are a thing that none of us want to see. We want to see a fully staffed department, and fortunately it's gotten better, and we're continuing that. But that's your deck of cards. That's your hand you were dealt that day, and so it comes into your decision factor, right? The thing with our district, we're such a complex district. Let's head out to Murrieta and 59. They live that. They've always lived that, right? And what are they going to? Their next in's 15 minutes out. Trucks, 30 plus, and so these are huge impacts on our company officers' abilities, and engineers and firefighters, and what they're going to do. That's a whole different mindset we need to get in. And I'm really proud of us. The fact that we're talking about this stuff compared to where we've been before is awesome. So thank you for bringing that up, because it changes if we have two structure fires in an area, right? And all of those factors come into play. So it's a great point to make. That's that constant change we got to adapt to, right? So you're on a truck and you have one of your firefighters or somebody that needs to go home on whatever reason, then you're down to 3, changes your dynamic, right? Battalion chiefs out of the area because they're at training. You're the first in or second in company officer. You're going to run that second alarm fire because there's no command officer coming. That changes your dynamic, right? So that's what, when we talk about infinite impacts, those are all pieces and parts, but that's something of reality we can absolutely allude to right now, and that's what's happening. So thank you for bringing that up.
From everybody's perspective on an emergency scene, you're in command. How can we do a risk assessment? How can they do a risk assessment? What are the things that they should be doing to assess the risk?
Well, I think obviously it depends on the incident. Hold on, I'm gonna start over.
You're doing a day job.
It's going to depend on the incident itself, right? Like what type of incident you're going to.
That has a mute.
I know, but I can't. I'm in service right now. I got a job. For me, like, my risk assessment starts before I even leave the barn, right? Like, so I'm sure everybody knows, there's a lot of times I don't turn on the red lights and sirens on my vehicle. A lot of that has to do with what the call comes in as, right? And as a captain on the engine, I read the information on the screen. Being a paramedic, having run some calls, I knew based on some of the information presented that it might not be always prudent to run lights and sirens at 5 o'clock up Watt Avenue for a person who's had the same toe infection for a week, right? Because those calls do come in, and depending on how it's put into the CAD, you're dispatched a certain way. To me, that risk assessment starts there, right? Because there is risk involved in that. Anytime you start responding code 3, you put yourself, your crew, and the public at some level of risk, right? So how do we mitigate those risks? We send people to evac. We hold engineer tests to make sure people are qualified to operate that apparatus, right? There are a lot of ways that we mitigate those things before we even get to the fire. When we start talking about fire incidents, obviously the size up is going to be huge, right? What type of building is it? What type of complex is it? If it's an apartment building, how to what level of involvement the structure is with fire. To me, like what the condition of the building is before it's on fire plays a big role, right? So if it's been mentioned already, you have a boarded up, structure that seems abandoned, my tolerance level for risk is going to be significantly lower than if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I have a house that I know is inhabited and there is nobody standing out front. So I think we could have a very long conversation about how we do that risk. But for me, I pretty much break it down. I remember as a captain, it was more of a go, no-go type situation, right? Like that's what I would look at it and say, can we make a difference? Should we go in or should we not go in? As battalion chief, I add that next element to it of go, no-go, and should we go? And I almost try to prove it to myself of why are we doing that? So, and to be honest, I think about it from a perspective of if I had to stand in front of one of your families and say, this is why I sent them into that situation, could I justify that if something bad happened, and that's where, to me, that's where the rubber hits the road when it comes to risk assessment, because all of us have those. We have important people to think about. We have important pieces of your career to think about and consider. And I don't think that trading aggressiveness means that we are not smart, right? Taking into account all the things that you're presented with in the situation, the type of the building, the involvement, whether there's people outside or not saying, everybody's out, whether you have other resources available to you there or backup, contingency plans if things go wrong. All of those things factor in. And then in the end, when you stack all that, then I look at it and say, okay, can I justify putting people into that environment or not? If the answer is no, then we're going to try to come up with some other plan. We're not just going to quit and walk away. And it might delay one tactic while we employ something else, but we're probably going to still come back to that search. So since that's what we're mainly talking about, searching here. So,
Chief Fernicki, what are some of the biggest risks that we face on incidents?
Well, to continue with Chief Daly's discussion about risks, I think a lot of this conversation really revolves around how do we mitigate them? How do you recognize them? How do you mitigate them? So the question about the biggest, we can go down the list and look at statistically what's the biggest threat and what causes the highest number of line of duty deaths. But on a daily basis, without any tragic event, there's risk to everybody. We can start with driving to the call. How do you, as a company officer, as a crew member, how do you mitigate that risk? Are you wearing your seatbelt or not, right? You're on the side of the road. How do you mitigate that risk? Are you wearing your orange vest? Are you in the appropriate PPE? Do you have on a jacket that can be seen? Are you pulled off to the side? Do you have your lights on? So there's everyday action that causes risk that we take or don't take, but we mitigate them. Specific to the fire ground, obviously the fire's hot and there's lots of smoke. So we're fortunate. We just came from a meeting with our safety team about PPE. We're mitigating the risk of thermal injury or respiratory injury with our SCBAs by having the best equipment, looking at it every couple of years, going through the wear test trial with our PPE team, and trying to mitigate that as best we can. On the fire ground, with the fire and the smoke and those hazards, obviously to continue on with what Sean was saying about the building itself. Is there lightweight construction? Is there abandoned building? Is it made out of this or that? Is it vent limited? But all those things, in my mind, lead to action. They lead to the next step. We all know if there's wires down, then wires down doesn't mean we stop. It means, how do we mitigate? Do we post somebody there? We announce it on the radio? How do we let everybody know to make sure we mitigate that risk? So back to the question, Joe, about what's the biggest risk? We face risks every day, and we do a phenomenal job at mitigating those. And there's an infinite amount of risks that we face. It's about being able to recognize them and know how to work through or around them.
So Chief Vestal, how do we recognize risk?
Well, I think the first piece of recognizing risk, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is do we have a full picture of the incident? What level of intel do we have? And one thing I've learned, more recently, when you start thinking about it, is do we have a full picture of what's going on? And in the first few minutes, we typically don't. What we know in the first 5 minutes is different. We know in the next 5 to 10 and 10 to 15, right? So part of it, I think, if we're talking about how do recognize risk, is does this seem risky? And if something seems risky, how would we identify that? I think it's a matter of looking at our level of engagement, and is our level of engagement matching the resources we have in play? Do we have the right tactics? And I'll use tactics and mitigations interchangeably. I think every tactic that we implement, search, fire attack, ventilation, those are all tactics that have some sort of risk reduction component to them. If we're implementing a tactic, everything it should be doing should have some effect on the safety of occupants or firefighters. And same with personnel type issues too. And really anything we do, any action we take should be leading to a better outcome, better situation. And if it's not, then it's a kind of a resource that's getting expended not towards the benefit of the incident or the issue we have in front of us. So, is it analysis? Is it intuition? I think it's a little bit of both, but I think when you're moving at real time, whether at the company level, the firefighter level, the battalion level, the shift commander level, or personnel management type issue, does the situation in front of you match something that you've seen before? And it may not, right? I mean, not every situation you're going to face is exactly the same, and it's experience-based, it's time on the job based. But I think the biggest part of that, in my opinion, is does it match something you've seen before, or is a situation that you've studied or been a part of that's led to an adverse outcome? It may not be something you've experienced individually, but again, it's the study of building construction, fire behavior, fire progression, search and rescue operations, technical rescue aspect, hazmat calls. It's this wide, broad background slide composite we put together to recognize, is this incident in front of you right now, does it feel right or does it not feel right? And if it doesn't feel right, whatever level you have or whatever function you have in that particular incident, if it doesn't seem right, then you need more information and an analysis of the tactics in play and the resources available need to be re-examined and adjusted accordingly. You can use a command philosophy to do that. It's a constant reevaluation process. But I think for me, at the battalion chief level, is at that moment in time, does the level of engagement match the tactics that are in play and the resources I have available? That can be for fire tech, that can be for search, that can be for ventilation, that can be for a truck company engaging without the right number of engine companies available. That can be an engine company engaged without the right amount of vertical ventilation in place. So that comes back to awareness, that comes back to that situation awareness, the 360 and communications as well. And then risk versus benefit analysis, I just think that's a very rapid assessment of the values at risk versus our resources that we have. And can we, is it likely that we're going to have a successful outcome for both the public or the values at risk and also the firefighters, our members, our employees? Because if we're engaging in a tactic that has a low probability of a successful outcome, then we can't redeploy or use those resources to fight another day. So I think that's a very holistic attitude at it or approach to it, but I think that's what I look at, that risk versus benefit piece is, can I have a successful outcome with what I have in play, and does it match the values at risk and the probability that if I place a high level of risk or exposure to my people, can we have a successful outcome to the public or the values at risk?
I'd like to jump back to something Chief Rudnicki touched on, and it kind of goes into what Chief Vestal was talking about, was you touched on our PPE. and the thermal protection our PPE provides, and it's gotten better and better over the years. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is when things go bad quick, sometimes your PPE isn't going to give you the indications that things are going to go bad. You have to, if that makes sense. The level of experience comes along with that, recognizing that if you're at the point where you're getting burned with your PPE on, something's going sideways on you, you've probably taken that risk a step too far. It comes with experience. We have a very young department. It's almost a false sense of protection. Our PPE is only going to go so far for us. We have been to funerals with guys who have been in full PPE. We've had members here that have been burned in full PPE. Most of our burn injuries, to my knowledge, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, guys have been in their full PPE. The ability to recognize the risk you're up against and to mitigate something that's in front of you before you take that next step is an important thing to remember. And unfortunately, a lot of that, like I said, comes with experience, comes with time on the job. And we are a busy fire department, and we do have a lot of fires, and statistically, they're going up. The experience end of it you touched on. It's something that we train for with our live fire training, being able to recognize how far your PPE is going to take you into a structure before things get really bad and it's beyond your control.
And I think to your point, PPE is really it's your last line of defense. That means all the other tactics, mitigations have failed, and that's your opportunity to get out of that situation, readjust. But if we can't strictly rely on the PPE, that's the last line of defense.
Right. And you talked about the experience piece and agency-wise, years on the job, whatever. It's not bad. It's just a reality of where we're at. And so how do we, as an organization, recognize that? Right. It's right here. It's right now. Let's talk about it. Right. I mean, it's as a growing organization that's going in a good direction, we wouldn't necessarily even address this in the past. So let's talk about, hey, how do we inject it? It's the training, it's the live fire that we're doing a better job at. It's the coffee table discussions. It's getting out and talking about incidents, talking fire and dealing with that stuff. And
it's also the senior members on the fire ground, the company officers, who've got more slides than maybe a new guy does, to recognize those things and watch out. And one of the things I always tell my crew is, it's 4 sets of eyes, 4 sets of ears. And if you see something you don't like, I might not see it. Yep. I'm the company officer, but I'm not seeing everything. Yep. And so if something's making the hair on your neck stand up, let somebody else know.
Yep. It's a great point, because like we mentioned before, the windshield. Yeah, what do I see out of your windshield? Could be this. It could be this. Right? Could be somebody on the radio going, hey, you had a significant change, volume, of smoke change, the color change, it's pushing harder, you're pending flashover. So all of those pieces are situational awareness. And so everybody has the opportunity to make decisions and have input, and that's a great point. But we need to be doing more of this. We need to be doing more of the talking, and we recognize that. And so it's another good thing that we're here today even discussing. So
can I speak to the training?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll try to make this brief. When you're looking at the progression of an incident, I think that the training that we've done and the cultural shifts we made, PPE, training, education, discussion we're having, after action reviews, all these different things.
Tactics and strategies.
All about it, and a really, really thorough assessment of different structure fire types. Whether you're new or old, I think one thing that adds to everybody's perception of incident progression is everything we're doing should, and with the efficiency that we're developing as a fire department, things should continuously get better quickly, very quickly. And if things aren't progressing in the right direction fast, if we're seeing positive changes, I think in the order of minutes, barring an established commercial fire or a very large wildland fire that's wind driven, that down to the newest firefighters, you don't have to have a lot of experience because this is not getting better. Every minute things should be getting better. And if it's not, that should just be that at the individual level, at the company level, at the incident level, at the team level, right? Everybody should be asking, why is this not getting better? Why is this not getting better? So I think you don't have to have a lot of experience to do that.
I'd like to throw out too, I'm relatively new as well, and I feel like I've got a good grasp on how to recognize risk, and a lot of it isn't based on experience, but it's based on education. I've dove real deep into reading books and stuff. I think it goes a long way. Captain Whaley probably taught me this in the academy, but building construction and fire behavior, those are your two number one things you got to hit on. So if I could recommend some books to some people, Vincent Dunn's Collapse of Burning Buildings, it's a great one to start out on. It's a little dated and a little East Coast-ish, but it's a good base. The Mittendorf and Dodson book that's in all of our stations, The Art of Reading Buildings, that's like the building construction Bible for me. You'll learn a lot. There's a guy out there named James Johnson, Barry Franke. They do a lot of seminars on building construction, and it's built for firefighters. Awesome resource. And then live fire training. You know, people say, oh, it's not a real fire, but I've been on the fire behavior cadres for a long time now, and that amount of time that I've spent in that burn box and understanding what's too hot and what's not has been so valuable to my career where I sit now. And then even just go on YouTube and watch fires. People make fun of, the YouTube firefighters, but that's a real thing. If you watch videos, YouTube, your brain will make that your own memory, and you'll capture it just like it's a real experience for you, and you may use it someday down the line.
You make a great point, Cap Beveridge, and I alluded to it before, we can't wait for the experience to happen for people to learn stuff, so we got to look at those alternatives. And if we would be remiss if we didn't recognize our ability now to, even with our own incidents, right? We talk about cameras and bystanders, and we've been getting a lot better video from bystanders just because we're making contact with them. Hey, give us, and if we're not using that for training, we're not doing what we should be doing, because that is real world experience in our own district. YouTube's another great option, but leverage all of those things, because that's how you can't inject experience, but you sure can add some good discussion to embed that into our memories and give us those slides, if you will, moving forward into things we haven't dealt with before. Not a whole lot of us have been to dozens of big box fires, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen, but we sure have examples out there where we can have those talks and figure out, hey, what would you do if? And then you're looking at that picture and you add in injects and just go from there. So thank you, Brent. It's an excellent point.
So for me, as a firefighter, my risk assessment it starts a little bit. We've talked about a lot of things, and it's a look inward. It starts with a look inwards, and then a look to your crew. Who are you working with? I remember Mike Dott, 24, when Harris and Wham worked for him, when you were one of his contemporaries on B shift there. He told me once, I'm only 100% when Jeff is in the driver's seat and Wham's in the back seat. That's what 100% looks like. That's the most we could all be as a crew. That's the most you can be as a firefighter, 100% for you. Everything else is a liability. Now, each company, each crew comes with their own assets and their own liabilities. To take a moment to reflect on where you fit in that link and recognize weaknesses and strengths, and how you either support, be an asset for that team. Because my job, when it comes to all of this stuff that we're talking about, is more on the aggressive side. It's my job to go as hard as I can, as far as I can, as long as I can, relying on my crew, the crews next to me, the crews that are going out there, and trusting the decision makers to be continuing this risk assessment process, to know who I am, what my abilities are, how far I can go, and hopefully I've put some trust in my crew or our crews, and that's how we demonstrate our professionalism, and we get away with our level of aggressiveness. Chief, you talked about it, by demonstrating what we can do and what we can accomplish and how far we can go and what we're willing to do. That being said, it's me and my crew that are the risk that we're talking about. Like when we talk about our skin in the game, whether it's going to the roof for the folks inside or doing a search. That's the hard part of the search. The hard part of the search is you're putting a lot of trust in the nozzle team, and then what they're doing, and you, especially if you're stepping past the hose line or you're making a right because engine company's making a left, is that you don't have control of that piece anymore. And fire conditions are changing every moment that we go in there. The nozzle team is affecting change, whether or not someone's on the backside opening windows or anything like that affects change. But we're still in that moment hopefully in that risk assessment, when we're in that life priority mode and we're in this offensive strategy and we're getting after it, not only you guys are trusting us to do our job, the public is trusting me to go in and find them if they're in there, or it comes down to a cat or a dog, right? And I think that's the biggest risk that, and we've touched on inexperience and stuff like that. That's at different pieces. That's up and down the chain of command and at different decision points, and at every step in the game, right? But again, if we're all, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if I started saying that at some point it's outside my pay grade, if you will. We can't, Barsdale, when he was on the truck, a truck company on an auto extrication is a good example of there's too many soups in a kitchen. Sometimes if everybody comes up with a new plan, a new game plan, we're gonna attack this door, no, we're gonna attack this door, nobody comes out of the car. If we're going through the motions and we have our play and we're doing our offensive fire attack that we do, and first engine company's doing their thing, second engine company, first truck, second truck, and we're all in this play strategy, we're doing the things that we do, that's when we get away with being aggressive, when the dance is going together. And that's what my job is, to be able to do my job as professionally as I can, as hard as I can, for as long as I can, until the decision makers tell me it's not safe anymore, it's time to come out. And at some point I have to trust that, because I'm trusting you that you're keeping me safe going in. I'm trusting that, hey, we're still sending people in. If I'm making a right-hand turn and Bryce is on a nozzle, or he's got his firefighter on the nozzle and they're going after a kitchen fire, that they're doing their part while I do my part.
So that was a perfect example of what I meant when I said if we're assessing the risk correctly, we're implementing mitigations, that does allow you to go as hard as you can for as long as you can until somebody tells you to stop. However, I will say that everybody on the fire line, within that task that you're doing, you're making calculated risk calculations over and over and over again, whether you're moving from one room into another, or upstairs, downstairs to upstairs, or from the ladder to the roof. You're doing that at every step of the way. You're assessing that risk. You're making a decision. You're mitigating, and you're doing it. Whether it's stay here at the door, I'm going to go. It's a small room. I'm going to go search it. You're hedging your bet on being able to find your buddy at the door again, right? So you're making those assessments, decisions, mitigations, and doing those actions even at your level. But I appreciated the fact that you understand that there are other people, like your captain, the division, the incident commander, who are looking at it as well and putting mitigations in place. And at some point, and when we reach that risk tolerance, it's just no longer acceptable for the values at risk. Then we're going to say, okay, enough's enough. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, we're talking about, very low percentage of the time do we walk away. First of all, we don't fail well, right? And we consider anything less than, saving everything in that house failure, right? So we just don't do it very often. We just don't walk away. So, but that's a great point.
I think when you're talking about the decision makers, I mean, tongue in cheek a little bit, you're talking about like Chief Lozano just said about incident alignment, right? The strategic, tactical, and above that, the priority level of the incident. But you nailed it, is you are making those, you're doing the command philosophy and making those risk assessments and mitigations at the task level as well. And the point is at all levels of that incident are lining up. So the decision makers are in alignment with what you're doing and searching that room, right or left hand, clearing a room or whatever you're doing. And so it's an important point to make. But it applies across the incident, across the organization, just at different levels of the incident alignment, if you will. So,
I got a question for you, Tim. I'll kind of put you on the spot here a little bit, but I think we're all, no matter what level you're at in an incident, the first 5 minutes, limited information, right? And so if you guys, engine a truck, show up as a truck, go to the truck on it, or going up to the roof as a truck company, you're having to make judgment calls, very subjective decisions. So my question to you with those comments is what's your personal, this is philosophical, at what point in the road, or if that fork in the road, would you go, yep, I've hit that decision point to disengage or engage? What is that for you personally? When the decision makers aren't there, you're the only decision maker, command's not established. I think that's the difficult conversation with risk management is what's your threshold of pain, if you will, to disengage, engage, or get additional help? Like, what's that look like for you?
I don't know, that's taken a lot of kind of broad spectrum. Like I've been there at Truck 106. We haven't always had an engine company. You know, we've been first in on house fires, and it's a difficult spot. If we're not in, I mean, we don't do very well at, and to speak globally, falling outside of our playbook, right? Like somebody's putting water in, somebody's bringing water to that pumper, trucks doing what trucks do. Fortunately for me in my environment, that's always, even if it's me and a driver on a search, it's a group decision, it's a team decision. Like, oh, we can't go in there. We've been pushed out. I mean, I remember saying to a driver on going in on a search, oh, I forgot my hood, and he pats me on, and he says, no, it's just hot in here. Let's go, right? That's one of those pushes when nozzle's going right and engines, and we're going to the left. It's so dynamic. It's so fluid. I think that, again, I'll stick with on my level, it's what can I get away with? What can I continue to get away with? How far can we go? How much can we get away with? The only time we were first in on a pretty good fire without water, we were like trying to weigh a garden hose attack versus a search when we knew that the wheelchair-bound occupant was over to the left, and that's where all the fire was. So we knew that a search to the right wasn't going to be productive. We've been there on medical aids. So you're trying to do the garden hose fire attack that's getting nowhere. So it's a moving target of what can I get away with? Oh, I can go more. I can't go anymore. Let's turn around and go back. But it's a group decision, and I think experience plays a lot in that, and you did mention PPE, but I think that starts with an acknowledgement of who you're working with, who your partner is, what 100% looks like, where your assets and liabilities are.
Because I guess kind of directed towards what you were saying with that aggressive search, and we're not going to abandon the search. We're just going to adjust the search, right? So we still have values at risk. I think that's my question to you is at the operator level is how do you having that forward intel? Because quite honestly, at the command post, I may not see it. I'm not going to have it. Yeah. You know, we're relying back on you to provide that feedback. So how do you, the operator, adjust those needed tactics to not abandon the search, but re-engage it some other way? Does that make sense?
That's a hard one. You know, I think our biggest liability or our risk in that point is that, again, in my experience, doing a search away from the nozzle or past the nozzle has always worked. They get the fire. We get it, and the conditions improve. They get better. Whether it's an apartment fire or a residential house fire or something, it's going to be those moments when, and I know we've had companies that have done that. It isn't meeting my expectations. This isn't what I've seen before. It's getting hotter. It's getting darker. I'm not convinced that my left is my left anymore. That's as far as I can. Right. That's as far as we can. When you get to that point to where like I'm not making any progress, I'm not doing it. That would be my turnaround point in a search. Is like I'm no longer effectively searching, and I'm not even sure where I am. That's a meetup. We're done. And something needs to go out, and that's information that command needs to make, because now you know it's not done. What did I get accomplished? Now if we're moving back into, okay, that we had a garage collapse, we need to reset, right? Okay, what did I get accomplished? What can I accomplish from the exterior? Is there something that I can still get done? That's still a mission that was given to me. I'm still going to try and get that done for you, but there's going to be a recalibration on that level if we can.
I think a big part you have to talk about with what you're saying, Tim, is that's the perspective of a 17-year firefighter. We don't have a whole lot of 17-year firefighters out there. We have a bunch of, 6-month to 5-year firefighters. And so that perspective is going to be far different than what he's evaluating when he's making that decision.
But Chief Estel made a great point. Like the decisions that are being made at the command post or at the captain level or at the division level are informed 100% by the companies that are inside, the members that are inside. And so even if you don't have a 17-year firefighter, if you've got a firefighter who communicates that it's getting hotter, or I've made a left and I no longer know, I can't advance anymore, that communicates not only the risk, but maybe back to the captain or to that division or even the incident commander to do something. We can do something about that. We can support that. We can maybe the first line doesn't go where I thought it was going to go. Now it's going to go over here to support that new information that I got, and it's part of that constant reevaluation when we talk about the command philosophy. So we're only informed, or the command posts are only informed by those decisions through competent communications back, that crystal clear communication. And that's where I've asked before big crowds of people in here, and I've said, when should you give a CAN report? When should a command officer have to ask for a CAN report? And the answer should be never. I should never have to ask for a CAN report, because I'm getting constant intel that is significant, relevant, and concise intel, so that I can make a decision or I can validate my plan that I've already got working, and I don't have to adjust it based on that new information, that new situational awareness. And so exactly what you're saying, all of those things about meeting up and saying, hey, it's too hot, let's go this way, let's go, that information gets communicated back in a timely manner, and now we can put mitigations, we can put controls in, we can do things that allow you to continue to be that aggressive as far as you can, as hard as you can. And so that's when we go back to what I said originally. I think operating in a really good risk assessment, risk mitigation, risk tolerance platform gives you the ability, gives us all the ability to be as aggressive and as successful as we possibly can.
I'd like to add on to what Chief Estel asked Tim, and kind of goes along with what you were saying about how we don't have a lot of folks with a lot of experience here. I think one way to help alleviate some of that is by having a playbook. As a company, you have a playbook, you have your default formation that you show up and you're like, all right, we're gonna do a split search. And then you get in there and you go, ooh, hot, I can't see anything. Now we're gonna do an oriented search. We're gonna get skinny, right? We're not wide anymore. We go to a building that's scary. That's what I call it, a scary building. It means it's very big, or it has lots of twists and turns inside of it, and not an ordinary layout. Now I'm gonna go to like my contingency style of search, where I'm gonna use a search rope or a hose line or something like that. So just being able to have a playbook and it helps you when you reach that trigger point to easily adjust. Like, okay, now we're moving to this style of a search or whatever, you know.
And all of that.
You're still doing a
great
search.
information for them.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was saying all that would be great information for.
It would be, and in reality, it's very hard to articulate that information during an active, fire. Yes, in the perfect world, it is pertinent information, but.
The thing I liked about what you said about that is that's the risk mitigation. You already have a plan going in, and you've trained to it, right? So when we talk about Tim's 100% that he referenced, and I'm confident that even when it's not your 100%, probably in the first 30 minutes of a guest at your station or a different crew member, you're probably having those conversations to at least ensure they can function with you when you get that fire. It takes forethought and planning and leadership to say, here's what we're going to do, here's our plan, here's our playbook, and when we have these things, this is how we mitigate them. And that is that risk assessment that we're talking about. How do you still function? But obviously training is close to my heart, so that's on the front end of it. You plan for it.
In the firehouse, we tend to simplify our risk assessment, right? So we say things like, risk a lot to save a lot, or the best way to mitigate our risk is to put the fire out. So I just want to open up the discussion on some of those things, like how would you hear comments like that in the firehouse, how would you lead a discussion on how to clarify or give a little bit more depth to that, risk a lot to save a lot, or, well, all we have to do is put the fire out and then our risk goes away. Like, that's true, but there's more to the discussion, right?
And it is true. And, we talk about, we like to call ourselves an aggressive department, which I think we are. And the different players on an incident, knowing what their roles are and effectively getting to that seat of the fire or getting quick water. There's a lot of truth to that. How do we lower our risk beyond that? Well, it's what we've been talking about. It's training. It's knowing the target hazards in your area. It's knowing your first in, which I think is huge. Knowing your first in is gonna help you a lot. Knowing which buildings are sprinklered, which residential structures, what they look like on the inside. When you're going on your everyday calls, 90% of our calls, you know, are medical aid calls, going in there, looking around, and knowing what to expect when it's hot and smoky inside and you can't see, but you've been in a very similar apartment hundreds of times. You know, you are lessening your risk because you're familiar with what the layout is versus a scary building. And we've been on those calls too, on medical aid calls, and that's usually when you realize it. When you look around and you guys take a look at this, and people start asking questions. Did you see that? Did you see this? Getting a good picture, we talked about 360s a little bit, getting a good picture of what you have as a first arriving officer, or even as a first arriving medic unit, because that's happened too. Getting good eyes around the structure, seeing what the conditions are, what's it telling you, communicating that back on an arrival to the incoming units on what you have, and as the incident progresses, what's it doing? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse?
So we've been talking a lot about fires, and I think it's a great conversation. But that question, what comes to mind when you ask that question is really a body recovery versus an active rescue, right? So risk a lot to save a lot. You have an active rescue, or somebody just went into the water. If you see them, or you know about where they're at, we're going in the water, right? With the proper PPE on, we're going in. Now that person's been missing for a day or 2 days, and now you see them. You're slowing everything down. We're putting the proper mitigations in place, downstream protection, all the stuff that we need to do, and then we're going to go in and get that. And that's a great example of risk a lot to save a lot. We're going to risk very little to save something that's unsavable. So that comes to mind. Or night operations on the boat. It might be recent, but we're going to slow things down. We're going to make sure we have the proper lighting. We have things because what are the chances of us getting in trouble, and it increases that risk. We're still going to go do it. And that's the thing I think we need to be careful of. Like when we start talking about risk assessments and risk mitigations, and people automatically go, we're not going to do this anymore. We're trying to take all the risk out of our. No, we're not. No, what it is us accepting 100% that we cannot control all the risk, that we cannot mitigate it away, and nor do we want to. Like nobody, we probably half the department wouldn't be here if there was no risk in our job. That's not the point. The point is, in order for us to be professional, we mitigate, we recognize, and we control what we can control through training, through PPE, through all the stuff we've talked about, and then we go do our job aggressively. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about getting rid of the risk. We can't do it. We should get that out of our minds. It's always going to be inherently risky, and that's okay. Now, we signed up for that. But what we don't need to do is go and make it more risky by decisions that we make that don't take all of the situational awareness that we have available to us in consideration, put in any mitigations that we can, communicate back, and we just go make decisions because it's the way we've always done it. That's the difference.
One of the things we haven't really talked about, it just kind of came to mind too, when you talk about risks, is, in recent times, Stockton, a risk, the captain was shot, killed on an outside fire, and it's not the first time that's happened. We find ourselves with less, I don't want to say support from law enforcement, but availability. Mm-hmm. We've been on those calls where, you know what, we're going to stage. Something doesn't look right. I don't like what something's telling me on my MDC. We're going to stage. There's no harm in doing that. Weird things happen, and lessening our likelihood of getting hurt or killed on a medical aid call, because it's a reality in today's world, is something that we need to talk about, and we need to think about. And not just as a company officer, as a crew member. The saying is, we got to get everybody home in the morning. That's the goal. And with the weird incidents that have happened in recent times, it's something that needs to be on everybody's mind, and make that risk assessment on a mundane call that we go on over and over again. Is the risk worth the gain on this, or do we wait? And we might be waiting a little bit longer than normal, and that's okay.
I flash back to, as a company officer on an engine company, walking up to a medical aid and not ever approaching the door straight on, just something because of the risk, right? I mean, we talk about what's happened in the past. You knock on the door and somebody, we've had our own companies, and it's happened, right? So that's a great point. We're not just talking about fires. It's freeway calls. Scare the crap out of me. That's the wing nuts are out there, and we see those, the firefighter close calls and Billy G. It's like that stuff happens regularly, and so when we look at that as an organization, we got to talk about that stuff too. Like you talk about experience. Like when you were talking about Captain in Stockton, I was like, yep, who would have known? Push up a door, boom. God, what a terrible, terrible situation. But what can we do to put ourselves in a position to maybe not have that happen? Just some of that little stuff that maybe we're not even talking about is, like you said, when it's like walking up to a front door of a residence and never being in front of it when I knocked. It's like, I'm going to make first contact, but I was always to the side. So and it's funny, I mentioned to my daughter last night, I said, yeah, we're going to do a video today. And she's like, oh boy, that's going to be great for you. You're a great face for radio, Dad. But so when I say risk, what does it mean? And the one, she goes, danger. I was like, interesting. Okay, I didn't think of it in that regard, but risk has a potential dangerous outcome, and it comes with everything we do. It comes with getting up in the morning. We're going to blow out a back muscle because whatever, but get hit by a bus, whatever. It's a big term, and what I go back to, like we start saying, the risk assessment, risk analysis, risk tolerance. People turn that off, but we have to recognize it. It is there, and so let's talk about it and train to it.
And not that any of us might have done anything different than those incidents on the freeway or the shootings, right?
Yeah.
But what we can do is, we can learn from that.
Absolutely.
And, you talk about having something flashing in your mind. I've seen that before. I think Captain Beveridge talked about it. I've seen that before. Maybe I haven't experienced it firsthand, but I've seen that before. We learn from these incidents and try not to repeat them.
And to go along with what Captain Whaley's saying, I had a document that I would give the crews in my battalion when I got promoted about dealing with public assist calls and medical alarms. Those are areas that can be very gray calls to begin with. You're going on something where a medical alarm was received, and now we might be trying to make entry into somebody's house, and we've seen incidents in other jurisdictions where personnel have been shot and killed, making entry to take care of an incident. And it talked about, it had some of those risk mitigations in it, talking about wearing clothing that identifies yourself very much as a firefighter, leaving your red lights on outside of the residence so that it gets people's attention, not making entry through a window unless you had verbal communication with the occupant inside. So I think that's an easy one to overlook because they are so routine, but they are no longer routine.
That's the routine, right? That's the buzzword. It's like as soon as it becomes routine, opening a door to check a building next to an outside fire. Thousands of times we've done that in that one time. Terrible situation, but we would not be doing those people justice if we didn't talk about it and utilize that to decrease our exposure moving forward.
So we talk about searching potentially ahead of a hose line. Captain Beveridge, I want you to touch on that one since you're helping lead up the search team. Is that appropriate? Is it not? When would it be?
I would say it's almost always appropriate. There's never any always or nevers in the fire service, but we are fortunate in our district that we have a lot of personnel showing up at the same time. We have dedicated trucks who are built to search, engine companies who are aggressively getting the hose line to the seat of the fire. There's not a lot of reason why we can't search ahead of the hose line, and that's also keeping in mind, like I was saying, having a plan and a alternative plan and a contingency plan and an emergency plan. That's what's going to make you be able to do those searches ahead of the hose line. And I think it really comes down to your size of the building construction, how intense the fire's burning, your victim profile, your training and experience. If you are a new person and you're not comfortable with it, then you probably shouldn't do it. But you also have to go home and look in the mirror and realize that you put your hand up and took an oath to go potentially put yourself at risk to save someone else's life. So if that's where you're at in the fire service in your career, maybe you need to look for ways to get better at your get some outside training, go to some conferences, learn how to do more proficient searches. Talking about your contingency plans when you're inside searching, there's doors that you can shut to compartmentalize yourself. There's lots of ways that you can mitigate, put in controls to make yourself safe, even without a hose line in your hand. Looking at, again, the data on the research from the Firefighter Rescue Survey, we know for a fact now, for sure, that it's about the amount of time that they're exposed to the fire that really makes a difference on their survival rate. So if we're waiting for a hose line to be in place to go make that search, we are decreasing their potential for survival. Some people may think that's only for known victim, known location, whatever you want to call it, but an alternative means of entry for a primary search, whether that be a Charlie side door, a Bravo Delta side door, or a window. Those are all potential ways that you can search ahead of the hose line. It's not as dangerous as people may think. And the survival rate based on that research that's coming out of the data that's coming out, the survival rate for people who are found from window-initiated searches is like 75%. It's insane compared to the other styles of searches. So I think it's a viable option, and it's ahead of the hose line.
But I think you hit a couple key points on that too. If we're doing that, we're putting risk mitigations in place if we're going in through that window, we're going in and isolating that compartment by closing the door. So yeah, we're putting our risk mitigations in place to reduce that risk as we're doing those tactics.
I think it's important to define what search ahead of the hose line means, because for some folks, the EIS is that. For others, that you may picture, playing the devil's advocate, somebody might see a nozzle at a door that has fire from floor to ceiling, and there's the hose line, and I'm going to search ahead of it, right? So we talk about always and never. Searching ahead of the hose line is a term that could be defined many different ways. And so when we talk about compartments and spaces and the survival rates for a tactic of doing VEIS, we ourselves have seen that a very successful tactic to utilize when we're doing some of those things in the right conditions. Searching ahead of the hose line in general is it's subject to many different definitions. But what you said there, Captain Beveridge, about the survival rates of 75%, I think it's important. Like, that is a tactic that can be considered searching ahead of a hose line, better defined by saying this is what that is. I'm going in a window, shutting a door, searching a bedroom that was likely occupied and finding a victim, versus, like I said, jumping into front of a hose line that's trying to put water in a door that's got fire from floor to ceiling and jumping in ahead of them. So important to define those terms for sure.
From a risk standpoint, when you guys are working at the company level, a lot of those types of decisions are going to be made before command's established, right? You guys arrive, engine truck, command's on establish, we're high risk, life priority, offensive strategy, right? When you guys communicate those tactics are being implemented, search or fire attack tactics, what is your expectation from command? When you engage at that level, you're assuming that risk. What do you assume the next steps are going to be from command as you engage? Like, what's the commitment back that you're expecting from the captain take command or the BC that's taking command?
Are you talking about communication or just in general?
What are you expecting? If you say, hey, this is Trek 26, we're issuing VS, Charlie side.
Right. So if I get that out on the right channel, I'm expecting communication back.
You remember.
Yeah, but I'm expecting you to communicate that. You heard me say that. But my expectation, and I think Tim White was talking about it, and I really agree with him about like the yin and the yang of the fire service, in that the firefighters have just got their ears pinned back and they're aggressive, and that's how they should be. That's how you want them to be. And then the captain's kind of got to hold the leash a little bit and look back. And it's like a prize fighter, right? Like, the prize fighter needs to be extremely violent. Mike Tyson's violent. But without a coach or someone to give him a fight plan, he's he's not going to last, right? Or maybe Mike Tyson would, but whatever style of fighting.
Strategy there, right?
Right. So the captain's kind of like the game, like the fight plan, and the firefighter is the violent, portion of that, and you work together. And then what I'm hoping for even more is out on the street, in the command buggy, a guy that's going to throw the towel in when it's like, dude, you're done, and that takes discipline. And I come from companies that are very aggressive, but we were also very disciplined. If the BC was like, hey, you guys get out, put everything down, and we get out right now. It's like not the time to argue or be tough guys or whatever. We'll re-engage later. But so it takes a plan, some aggression, and some discipline.
And I would also throw in there some support tactically from command. Acknowledgement that you understand what we're doing, and the support, whether it's an additional hose line or a hose line to a different side of the building, whatever. We could talk about that all day, but generally speaking, support tactically.
I would just add to that, Bryce. I agree with what you're saying, but I think we should also be training our firefighters to recognize themselves when something's bad or when I need to back up a little bit, right? We've had some burn injuries recently, and sometimes they can be avoided, right? If we can teach people to recognize this is bad, I need to back up, or I need to get lower or adjust my tactics. Absolutely, yeah. So it's a combination of both.
I would add also, we talked about, Andy, you mentioned the support piece. And I think from the incident commander managing the risk, looking at the overall incident, but really it is a lot of that support. You're trying to put pieces in place to support what's happening. And if that company's on scene first and they know high probability, back Charlie, Delta corner, whatever it is, we're going in this room. Some of that is what your need is. Because again, being blind from the front of the house, we think we know. But really our objective, or I can speak for myself, the objective is to support those companies when it's in alignment. What does that need? That really helps a lot to speed up that support piece versus commonly it's the back and forth, but recognizing like this is out of our playbook, this is what we don't normally do. So be sure to paint that picture of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the need is. Even if it takes a little more radio traffic, I think the end result is more support quicker.
Bryce, I appreciate when you're talking about the aggressive tactics that you and your crew will implement, that you've almost always, every time you brought it up in the setting, you've had a plan, a backup plan, and a contingency plan that you've spelled out before, and they said, I'm going to go do this action. And so when you talked about the event, enter, isolate, and search, you said, sometimes that's the best egress, alternative egress, but that's because you have your egress is blocked in some way, or the fire behavior is making it necessary for you to go and do the alternate egress, or you have intel such as a known victim and a known location for that victim. So all of a sudden, that makes a lot of sense, and you just communicated that back to the incident commander or the captain in charge or the division, why it is you're doing that, and then they can support you. And so I very much appreciate it. Not only and so this is what I've always said to my crews, whether as a captain or a battalion chief or now as a shift commander, is the thoughtful, aggressive firefighter, fire captain, battalion chief is what we're looking for. Aggression without thought, or thought without aggression doesn't get anywhere. And both are dangerous. Because if I think about it too long and don't take any action, I've just created a more dangerous environment than if I would have taken action. But if I take aggressive action and don't have any thought to it, I've just created a more dangerous environment because I'm not thinking. What you just talked about, you actually laid out for people that are listening, and for company officers or future company officers, you laid out my plan, my backup plan, and my contingency plan. It's communicated ahead of time, it's trained to, and it's communicated on the incident. That is how you become aggressive. And what you just talked about is exactly what we've talked about at the larger command level. And the incident, as we look at risk assessment, and I break it down into risk mitigation, you got a plan, right? I know how to support that plan now. And any feedback I get validates my support plan to your plan. You're gonna drop back to your plan B? Great, I'll support plan B. Your contingency plan, I'll support that with mitigation efforts that are gonna make you more successful, and they're going to allow you to continue to be as aggressive as you can be in that incident as it gives us through the priorities.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I think I want people to take away. We're not talking about not being aggressive. We're talking about setting yourself, your crews, and our district up for success by training to it. Well, first, recognizing it, talking about all of the ways to mitigate it or reduce it, training to it, be confident about it, communicating it, and doing it.
Yeah.
You laid it out perfectly.
I think, yeah, that's all that Chief Mitchell wants is for us to be aggressive, but to be able to explain why. Tell me why you did that. You know, have a good reason. To
No,
back
that's,
yourself up.
I disagree with that. I don't want, in my shift, I don't want you just to have a reason. I want you to have a thoughtful, purposeful, legitimate reason.
I got you.
Being able to describe it in this terminology is a very beneficial. I mean, if you're able to describe the thought, the reason through this, and it makes sense to somebody listening to it, that's great. That's what we're looking for. So, I think we talked a lot about risk today, but I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. I mean, the fact that we sat here and had a group to get together of differing ranks and experience, and some of us have known each other for 20 plus years, some of us haven't, to sit here and have this dialogue is phenomenal for our organization. And I'm looking forward to doing more of this in the future. So thank you for putting it together from training, and Captain Aldridge for gathering this group. And thank you all for your input in the discussion here today, because I really believe we work for a fantastic organization, and we can always do better, and we're going to get better as we go along because of this dialogue for us as an organization. So thank you.